of resilience. That's not a little technical part. I know how to spell, but as I was on the computer writing my reflection out, I kept typing resilience with an A, like how it sounds to me, resilience, kind of like in reliance. And that got me thinking that these two words are symbiotic and have a closer meaning than I originally realized. Resilience, according to Merriam-Webster, is the capability of a strained body to recover its size and shape after deformation. Reliance is to have confidence based on experience. Now, bear with me on this. Resilience is a virtue. It is about wisdom, insight, and endurance. Those are learned skills. The hard part comes when you have to turn those learned skills into successfully navigating through the heartache and pain and struggle. We do this by heeding the wisdom of those who came before us, as well as our fellow travelers. It's about moving through the hardships, the pain, the fear, and the suffering to become better, because no one escapes pain, fear, and suffering. Yet from pain can come wisdom, from fear can come courage, from suffering can come strength, if we have the virtue of resilience. In living life, fighting the battles, bearing the scars, learning the ropes, we become reliant on those who came before us in the journey to provide us with the wisdom and insight on just how to maneuver through this sometimes very brutal and chaotic world. We have so much wisdom from all walks of life available to us, not just a select few. With the click of a mouse, we have the works from philosophers, playwrights, poets, teachers, comedians, artists, writers, musicians, scholars, historians, as well as our ancestors who've passed down a wealth of information from generation to generation, from grandparent to grandchild, from parent to child, uncle to niece, aunt to nephew, and on and on and on. They all fought, worried, prayed, got involved in politics, struggled to find work, lost people they loved, got sick, fought corruption, cleaned up the debris after natural disasters like fires, floods, tornadoes, earthquakes. They tried not to fear death along the way. The same core struggles that we face today, just at a different time and place. They have a collective wisdom from their encounters with life's unavoidable struggles. Let us learn from and rely on all those blessed souls who struggled and fought and lived and loved centuries before we were born. Nietzsche referred to these collective works of wisdom as the overall aspect is that of a tremendous experimental laboratory in which a few successes are scored, scattered throughout the ages. Recipes for the art of living have been thoroughly practiced and lived to the hilt. The results of all their experiments belong to us as a legitimate property, as our legitimate property. I love how he emphatically states that this wisdom, born from struggle, belongs to all of us. But not everyone has access to all the hard-earned wisdom, nor can everyone read everything. But that is why we come together, to combine our shared wisdom. We all become more resilient when we are able to rely on each other. When we share our struggles, challenges, suffering, tragedy, and trauma, we not only ease our pain, but we gain wisdom of how others successfully coped with similar experiences. Pain shared is pain divided. Joy shared is joy multiplied. I'm always amazed at how a support group, which exists to help people who have suffered in some serious way, is always full of the greatest humor. It may seem a little dark or inappropriate, but there's humor. How can those who have faced such trauma and tragedy laugh again? They're resilient because they've come together to rely on each other. They have shared their deepest pain as honestly and openly as possible with others, giving them permission to do the same. And in that delicate space, resilience grows. That brings me to one of my favorite quotes from, and I have to pick these people that have the hardest names to pronounce for me. I'm just going to try to say the last name, Csikszentmihalyi. Of all the virtues we can learn, no trait is more useful, more essential for survival, and more likely to improve the quality of life than the ability to transform adversity into an enjoyable challenge. I know that right now I am very weary. There are a lot of tragic things happening in my life and in our world at this very moment. Sometimes I feel helpless that so many horrific things happen each and every single day, and I know a lot of y'all feel the same. I find strength in gathering with others, sometimes just to talk, sometimes to take action, sometimes to meditate and pray. But the strength that builds resilience in me comes from the gathering of others who are just as lost as I am on what to do and are looking for a positive way to make it through the crisis and the chaos. It is in the wonderful company of y'all, my fellow travelers, where I can recharge, find strength, gain resilience, and move through life's adversities a little better. Today, I will be the empathy, assurance, and love for others. That's what's mentioned in our Soul Matters packet this month, so that we can make it the rest of the way together and transform our adversity. There are some cards that I have made up for my Soul Matters group that I want to share with you. If you want one afterwards, just come see me. Some of you will recognize, can you change the slide? Yeah, it's a little easier to see than this little card. Thank you. Some of you will recognize the 26.2 as the badge of honor for those who have run a full marathon. I wanted to give everyone here some encouragement today and remind you that you have succeeded at running the greatest race of all, life. And that is why I put the infinity sign underneath. The infinity sign holds a deep meaning for spirituality. In a world filled with chaos, confusion, and complications, the infinity symbol represents a sense of simplicity and balance. It reminds us to be conscious of where we are and the endless possibilities we have before us. So let's run this race together. We become more resilient when we rely on each other. So I hope that if you're having a tough day, you can look at this card and be proud of just how far you've come and just how resilient you are. Thank you.
Lauren Leising will look at resilience through a mental health perspective and a nature-related metaphor.
Good morning. Good morning. As some of you know, I'm a marriage and family therapist, and I often discuss the idea of resilience in one shape or another with clients on a daily basis. The APA, or the American Psychological Association, has defined resilience as the process of adapting well in the face of trauma or tragedy, threats, or other significant sources of stress. I've gotten the impression that people often think of trauma when they think of resilience. But I believe that every person defines tragedy, threats, and significant stress differently. Something that may require resiliency in one person may be common practice for another. Think of the difference between a typical citizen handling a car accident versus an EMT, or a parent examining a broken bone versus a doctor in the hospital. I'm often amazed by the degree of resiliency that people have before they even make it to a therapist's office. I recall a mother who was told by her husband while she was rocking their 10-day-old second child that he no longer wanted to be a part of their family and would be leaving that night. I also remember countless examples of adults who were abused as children, but continued to attend to their daily lives and relationships with kindness and compassion. So I thought I could use the same metaphor here that I use with clients to talk about resilience. The metaphor involves something called SP Crater and is 100% true. SP Crater, located 25 miles north of Flagstaff, Arizona, was eloquently named by a rancher in the 1880s due to its resemblance of a toilet bowl. This is a family service, so we will continue to refer to it as its abbreviated name, SP Crater. If you want to know what it stands for, talk to me after the service. Well, SP Crater is a cinder cone volcano, which means it is made up of loose volcanic rock fragments. At the time that I encountered SP Crater, my then boyfriend's father, now my father-in-law, took his son, now my husband Ken, me and one of Ken's nephews to climb SP Crater in the summer of 2000 as a way to prepare us for our hike to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. I was 19 at the time and had no idea what I was getting myself into. When we first drove up to the SP Crater in the middle of nowhere, I thought, how in the world is this one crater going to prepare us for a full-day Grand Canyon hike? Well, just like some of life's situations can appear to be a breeze at first, SP Crater was not as easy as it appeared. For every 3 steps that we took, we slid down 2. We tried running, and we tried moving very slowly, but it did not feel like we were ever making any progress. We eventually discovered that we needed to be flexible, taking slow and steady steps at an angle up the side of the crater. So it seemed like hours later, we finally made it to the top, only to look down into the top of the crater and think, we climbed all that for this? A big hole in the ground that just looks like a toilet? Well, just like in life, we sometimes work our butts off only to discover that our efforts did not get us where we thought they would. But then I did take a moment to look up and all around the crater. And what I saw was surprisingly beautiful in the middle of the desert with no civilization around for miles. So maybe life has a way of throwing us a few toilet bowls, but often the big picture is not ruined. I frequently use this crater metaphor when clients feel like they're not making any progress. I remind them that their hard work, both physically and emotionally, is not for nothing. When they seem like they're making no progress at all with that deadline at work or their relationship with their mother, they can still benefit by continuing to push forward. For every 2 steps back, they're still taking a step forward, and they will eventually end up somewhere different than where they are right now. For every setback or heartbreak or transition, they can continue to make progress in their mental health and life goals. Now, the story did not stop at SP Crater for us. Remember, we still had the Grand Canyon to climb. And believe it or not, that stinking crater did help to prepare me, but not in ways I expected. The 7-hour hike to the bottom of the canyon went fairly well and smoothly. After hiking all day, however, what ended up getting to me was all the scorpions, mice, wolves, and some fairly aggressive deer at the primitive campsite at the bottom. I tucked my sheets so tight around my legs that night and checked my watch in my bed with a flashlight every hour. The morning of the hike out was a different story than the hike down. I was ready to go at 6 a.m. as instructed, but the boys were not at the meeting spot with me. Let's just say we got a late start. By the time we left, the blaring sun was already up and over the canyon's edge. So I tried to enjoy the beautiful scenery, but each time I looked up and counted the layers of canyon that we still had left to climb, I was quickly discouraged. I'm not gonna lie, I did cry at least once, thinking I would become dinner for the scorpions and wolves. But 11 hours later, we made it to the top of the canyon rim, just as the sun was setting, and dinner never tasted so good. SP Crater showed me that even if I didn't ever think I was going to accomplish a task, I could just by taking one slow step at a time. It also taught me that sometimes things look grim and unending, but it is usually temporary and can lead to something more beautiful later. Life can keep throwing obstacles at us and prevent often unavoidable and sometimes downright scary things. But we can choose to keep taking one step at a time. One more job interview, one more phone call, one more first date. I often think about SP Crater, whether I'm struggling personally with something challenging or I'm trying to help someone else navigate a difficult situation. 3 steps forward and 2 steps back is still 1 step forward.
Okay, next church camp out, that's what we're doing. Matt Craig. We tend to hear some of the same kind of inspirational story around resilience in the media over and over again. Matt will look more carefully at that narrative and at an alternative way to talk about resilience that he sees in his life and community.
Thank you. So when Michael asked me to talk a bit about resilience, my mind immediately went to the people that I think of as resilient, people with powerful life stories like Serena Williams or Malala Yousafzai. As I continued to look around, I saw a continuous stream of inspirational stories about resilience in the news and social media, and you might notice this in your news feed. They all tended to follow the same structure. So I want to look at two and talk about that. First is a story of a mother who went through a sudden divorce. After moving her kids into their own home, she started falling behind on utility and mortgage payments. She had been a stay-at-home mom while married, but quickly found herself working 2 and then 3 jobs just to avoid eviction and homelessness. Then, as Christmas approached and she found she had no money for gifts for her children, she sent out a plea on social media to take on additional work, which not only allowed her to buy her kids presents, but also to catch up on her bills finally. And then now she's able finally to move on from the financial and emotional strain of her divorce. And in another story, the author recounts her family's immigration. Her father had owned a car dealership in Colombia, but when a gang started kidnapping people in the neighborhood, the family fled to the United States. They left behind the business, everything they owned, found themselves in a small apartment rather than a big house that they had had before. Her parents spoke no English, but they sweated and worked hard to create opportunity for their children to make it in America. The author of the piece now works as an interpreter with immigration lawyers, using her experience to help those seeking to stay in this country. And of course, there's more to those stories. But I want to focus on the arc of them, the narrative arc. It's a familiar one. We have someone who experiences a great tragedy or hardship. And there's a tension. Will they make it? Won't they make it? They work hard, and they finally overcome the obstacles. In such stories as these, the hero, for these are hero stories, don't just return to their former life, but they learn a lesson about themselves or about life in general that enables them to come out the other side stronger, more hopeful, and happier than they had been before. These stories and the people they are about are inspirational and aspirational. Wouldn't we all like to overcome adversity in this way? But when I look at my own life, I don't see a hero's journey. Instead, I see, perhaps, the time where I was laid off from my position at the University of Texas just before my daughter's first birthday. Luckily, I had 3 months of severance to look for a new job, and UT and my coworkers actually helped me find a new position in a different department. Later that year, when we moved from my wife's temporary position in Massachusetts, I was able to work remotely. When I injured my back there, my employer insurance covered the bills. I kept that job even when we moved here to Fort Worth for the first year. And when that position finally ended, my wife was at a church party and told Trisha Bowes that I was looking for work. And through her husband, Craig, I was able to get hired locally. Now, there were plenty of places in that story where things could have gotten worse. We never had much money in our bank account. Unemployment and moving caused great strain and stress. But I was fortunate to have a supportive employer who not only valued my work, but me as a person. And through it all, I had a stable and supportive family. Now, to me, that story didn't seem as inspirational as the ones that I saw in the newsfeed. There's not very much tension, and there's no singular hero. And frankly, it's not exciting. It's regular life, at least to me. But it is a story of resilience. Resilient relationships, communities, and systems to which I belonged. As I look at the stories of personal resilience that I recounted earlier, I started to notice 2 problems in particular with these types of stories. First, the protagonists or heroes were often people from marginalized groups or those with less social and economic power. Women, immigrants, people of color, members of the LGBTQ+ communities, those with physical disabilities or mental illness, ethnic and religious minorities, people living in poverty. The social systems of resilience that I had benefited from failed them. These individuals had to show extreme perseverance and determination to overcome their hardships. Secondly, I'm reminded that these stories are compelling because they are rare. The author who wrote about her family's immigration notes that the legal and social opportunities her family experienced when they moved to the United States are being limited by the current administration. Far fewer people are able to take advantage of welcoming policies. And she realized when writing the piece that there were many people, even at the time, who didn't have the resources and connections that her family did. She notes that the narrative of hard work and perseverance she had grown up with, it was true, but it was also incomplete. There are many people in those same situations who cannot escape their hardships. They're stuck in debt, addiction, unable to move up in their jobs due to discrimination, with debt that continues to grow even as they pay off what they can, no matter how determined they are or how hard they work. But we, as Unitarian Universalists in particular, share values that call us to develop and promote resilience not only in our own personal lives, but also in our relationships, communities, and the systems in which we participate in. We affirm values that promote resilience through our 7 principles, including the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, and respect for the interdependent web of all existence. When I look at what we do here, from Circle Suppers and the InReach Fund, to supporting the Texas UU Justice Ministry and Black Lives of UU, to fighting for reproductive, Indigenous, LGBTQ+, and environmental justice, I see the promise of a more resilient world that could be. And even as we draw inspiration from the stories of great personal resilience, I hope we continue to tell the stories of and build resilience in our relationships here, our church, our communities, the country, and the world. Thank you.